Okay, so today we're going to take a look at Twisted for the 3DO. For those of you that don't even know what a 3DO is, well, it's this old system that only me and like 12 other people ever bought when it came out back in 1993. There's a ton of reasons why so few people ever bought a 3DO, but I can imagine the biggest reason was that this big bastard was asking nearly $800 for the privilege of owning one, and they weren't actually kidding. The price did eventually come down over the years though, but by then no one really cared. Everyone was much more interested in what Sega and Sony was putting out. That doesn't mean the 3DO was a bad console though, since it had a pretty nice selection of first and third party games that are still worth checking out these days. One of those just happens to be the game that we're looking at here. Twisted was released back in 1994 by a much less evil version of Electronic Arts. At the time, this was one of 3DO's standout titles, and we're gonna see if it's still worth playing today. So get your booty on over to the Matrix and roll your cyber die, because it's time to play a round of everyone's favorite Twisted game show. Start the game up and you'll get to see one of the cooler things that I always liked about Twisted, and that's how it acted like a TV show every time you powered it on. Besides the licensing screen, Twisted doesn't actually have any menus or options to speak of. It instead just jumps straight into a brand new episode each time, lending itself to feel like an actual TV show instead of a game every time you turn it on.
Thank you! You are definitely the best audience.
And what a show it is. Hosted by Twink Fizdale, yes, that's a name that they actually gave someone in this game, Twisted is basically an eternal hell dressed up as a game show that has you picking from a cast of contestants that include the likes of a used car salesman, a shady southern priest, a fortune teller, and yes, even a sentient Pez dispenser. With all their backstories presented using the finest terrible Photoshop pictures I've ever seen.
Come on down to Warmington's, where service is a slogan.
Also, if you haven't noticed by now, Twisted is filled to the brim with FMV. Literally everything, besides the set decoration, is completely recorded in full motion video. Just about every single thing you do on Twisted results in a camera angle, with each contestant having their own unique recorded animations. From their wild gesticulations to when you roll the cyber die, to just them standing to the side of the challenge board, aka the Matrix, waiting for you to pick something. The amount of work that was put into making these characters seem alive and part of an actual game show is pretty damn impressive for the time. And hats off to those actors who all seem to completely embrace the goofiness of the characters and really sell the whole idea of the game without being the embarrassing actors that most full motion video games were filled with back at the time. Twisted was so committed to the idea of being a TV show that you even get quick commercial breaks that endlessly entertained me as a kid.
What you need are teeny tiny chopsticks.
When I wear magnet perfume, no man can stay away. The passion could be fatal.
Now back to more Twisted.
Of course, all this is wrapped in the game's ridiculous humor, which sits squarely on the overly sugared up child side of things rather than anything being subtle.
Run, Otis! Run! Run, Otis! Run! Oh my God!
A lot of this actually reminds me of early 90s kids television, where everything looks like it's had neon splooged all over it, along with everyone just sort of yelling at everything for no particular reason. Thankfully, Twisted never gets too over the top, which is a weird thing to say for a game that has a sentient Pez dispenser as a character. It all just works in a weird, charming kind of way while constantly showering you with insanity.
Use the rug club. Hey folks, come on down to Warmington's for Otis's 5th birthday celebration. We got deals on all Otis's favorites.
Now back to more Twisted.
Speaking of playing the game, Twisted plays more like a basic board game rather than an amped up game show. After you've picked your character and appropriate difficulty level, you're simply taking turns with each other by rolling the dice, or as the game calls them, the cyber die, which then pushes your character up the game board. Most squares you land on will be challenge squares that then present you with the Matrix. Each row in the Matrix is filled with things like trivia questions, brief mini-games, or selections that can force you to change your place with an opponent or even just blow up with a bomb. Successfully finishing a challenge will allow your character to roll the cyber die again until you either screw up a challenge or land on one of the other board squares that are there to impede your progress, like skipping a turn or the dreaded wheel of torture that keeps you strapped to a spinning wheel until you can manage to match 3 of the same fruit icons up. We'll be getting more into those challenges here in a minute, but as far as how to actually play the game, that's really about it. Just keep doing all that over and over until you make it to the top of the board to win the game. It's all super basic, and besides the stuff that makes you switch places or spin the wheel of torture, everything else is pretty much by the numbers besides all the craziness surrounding it. And unfortunately, that crazy can only go so far. While Twisted has a lot going for it in terms of presentation, it just doesn't have enough in the gameplay department to drag it along. The first 10 or so minutes are spent laughing and wondering what in the world you're even playing with all the yelling and explosions and weird everything splashing across the screen. But after that, the reality slowly starts to set in that, well, you've kind of seen everything that the game has to offer in that amount of time. The first big problems are the mini games that make up the challenges. They're all mildly fun to participate in the first few times just for their ridiculous presentation, but once you've done them all a dozen times in the same round, the tedium gets real. While games like Mario Party offer dozens of fun mini challenges to make sure you're playing something new each time you have to participate in one, Twisted only offers up a total of 7 that you'll be seeing over and over and over again. That wouldn't be so bad if the challenges were fun to play, but unfortunately what's on offer here is a slim picking of unimaginative matching games that would manage to bore anyone's grandma to sleep.
Coming back. Introduce me.
Most fall into the Match 2 puzzles that we all endured back in first grade, and the rest revolve around matching jumbled up images to get them back to their original state. Even worse, several of the minigames are just clones of each other, with only a different coat of paint or theme differentiating them. None are remotely challenging to finish even on the hardest difficulty setting, with the only real challenge being to having to constantly endure them over the course of a full round. And getting through that round is actually the hardest part of the game. What really manages to push Twisted into torturous territory is the sheer length of a single round. Maybe it's just due to its age, but quiz show games like You Don't Know Jack and others like it learned a long time ago that going beyond the 15-minute mark to play a game like this with your friends is usually going to cause everyone to get bored and find something else to play. You need to keep things quick and concise with trivia-style games, or attention spans start to wander. Twisted apparently didn't get that memo at all, with a single round taking upwards of a full hour, and sometimes close to 2 if you manage to find a full group of 4 people playing. In fact, the video you see here is of me and my brother playing for over 30 minutes to get the video for this review, and we only managed to get halfway up the board. It's absolutely insane to think anyone, especially the drunk individuals that are most likely participating, could ever endure playing that long. Then add in having to repeatedly play the same 7 minigames 3 dozen times over, and you've basically got the desert bus of quiz games here. It just seems to go on forever. Twisted could have at least hid some of its repetition with quick 10 to 15 minute long rounds that would breeze by without its weird shine wearing off in the process. But this kind of length and repetition is just too much to ask of your audience, unless you just want to watch your friends go comatose around the 40-minute mark. I know I sound like I'm tearing this game apart, and I genuinely think it deserves to be over some of these decisions, but overall I really loved this game back when it came out. Sitting around with my cousins and playing a round or two was always a good time. Add in the humor that was right up my alley, and this was an instant classic for Teen Jeremy back in the day. Unfortunately, the days of being blown away by full motion video with the bare minimum of a game built around it is unfortunately long gone. While I still love Twisted's presentation and humor, all that can only stay fresh for as long as the actual gameplay can carry it, and that just doesn't go very far. It's a genuine shame that basically all of Twisted's biggest problems could have been avoided by at least doubling the amount of minigames and chopping rounds down to humanly reasonable times. Sadly, that's just not the case though, and what you're left with is a really great idea with maybe about 20 minutes of entertainment to sit through before you've seen it all. That being said, I'd still recommend it to anyone with a 3DO just for being fun for what it is and its high what the fuck value. It's a neat curiosity of a bygone time that can at least amuse friends or family for just how ridiculous it all is in that sort of, wow, this is what people used to find funny back in the 90s kind of way.
On the devil's chainsaw!
The biggest downside being that Twisted was only ever released on the 3DO, and that isn't the cheapest or easiest to find system these days. But if you've somehow got a 3DO sitting around somewhere and you've never experienced just how, well, twisted this classic game show is, then do Twink Fizdale proud by grabbing a copy and giving those cyber die a roll.
Ooh, I hear reality is just beautiful this time of year.